Alright everyone, you guys are about to witness a MonCon 2010 Vault exclusive here. I thought this match was going to get lost forever, and I would have been just fine with that. But instead, you get this match, and it is, if you've kept up with the site since MonCon 2010 or read any of the blogs, mainly that I've written, or if you've seen anybody make jokes towards me, it's generally about a headbutt. And it's a headbutt that I missed in this very match. And this is like, I was the 8th seed, Mark was the number 1 seed, and this was the first round of the top 8. So I was really playing for a really big deal here.
You were the potential Cinderella story.
Potential Cinderella story. Even with a quotient, you know, I could have taken my monster to the very top and just kind of blown the doors off of all things that we thought about Monster Apocalypse. But instead, I missed a really fantastic opportunity to not only show an undervalued power attack, but also to highlight a really exceptional monster, and one that I really enjoy playing. So that's what we're about to see here.
Yeah, I want to mention that I had the privilege of sitting in with Privateer Press's two most important people, DC and Will Schick, and the three of us did commentary for this match. And in the middle, this was our first time to stream a game live, and so there were a few technical difficulties, so there might be a minute or two where you hear commentary kind of go out and you don't hear from us, but the game will keep going, and you can watch the exciting conclusion of the headbutt almost heard around the world.
And I've never heard this commentary before, so I hope you guys weren't screaming at me the whole time. Anyway, here's the match, and enjoy.
Either way, they're placing buildings, and here we go. So today, Steven's been running Aquosia, and Mark's been running Megazord Macross. Did you expect Zord Macross to top 8 again?
Well, I thought it was one of those monsters that people would be like, oh, hey, he's won Masters before, he's definitely one I have to make sure I've got his number, but he is a solid monster, so I'm not too surprised that he's showing up here in our top 8. He's definitely one of those that can catch people off guard. And this is a good map for him, too.
Now, Steven, he's been running a 2-building list today. We talked about that some, DC. What are your thoughts on 2 buildings?
Well, I mean, obviously it's going to depend a lot on the monster. Certain monsters are better suited for it than others. But for monsters who like to have a more open board and who want to avoid getting taking collision damage themselves and don't rely on it for their offensive game plan, it can be a really good option. Quosia, thanks to Annihilate, doesn't really care so much about getting the collision damage out there and is able to play a good game regardless of the buildings that are on the map. In this particular case, I don't know if it's going to help too much. Yes, Zord Macross likes to do power attacks, definitely, but he is also pretty flexible and might be able to kind of shift his gameplay a little bit and still give Aquosia a real run for her money. Would you concur?
I definitely agree. I think it'll help somewhat because she's ground bound, so that'll make it easier for Steven to get around, but overall they're pretty well matched because they both have some form of double damage on their attacks.
Right. As soon as a couple of key buildings are out of the way, though, being ground mounted on this particular map is not as much of an issue as it is in a lot of them.
Yeah, because you make your way around. So now, as a Shadow Sun player, do you think it would be more beneficial for Mark to have gone first or second?
I lean towards going first. It's nice to establish a solid power base. Shadow Sun's great at that. You establish one underground network, a few of the pods around a building to grab that satellite support. You can really establish a nice early advantage that can seem hard to disrupt. Steven's a good enough player, though, that I don't know if it's going to really prove to be the case. He did choose to go first, right? Shadow Sun player?
I think they just rolled for it.
Right. But he's the Shadow Sun player is the one who's going first, and the Elemental Champions player picked the map, right? Or no?
No, I think Mark picked the map, and Steven's going first right now, getting his units ready.
Gotcha. Right, those are not units. Those are morphers. I didn't see it now. Sorry about that.
Now, I will say that the MonCon Masters was a 5-round qualifying for top 8 event, and Mark went 5-0, didn't lose a single game, and Steven went 3-2 and had some amazing tiebreakers, which skated him into the top 8 at the 8th seed, which is why he's playing Mark. So I look for this to be a really intense game. Interested to see if the Elemental Champions can put one on the Shadow Sun.
And you said that he was only actually 2 points of damage off from going 5-0, right? His 2 losses, he had his opponent down to 1 life both times.
He did, and that's what was so intense about his tiebreakers, is that he had a form kill in every round, and I think he did a little over 50 damage in 5 rounds. So kudos to Steven for making it top 8.
Yeah, it's certainly not the most direct path, but in this particular format, almost killing every single thing you fight is a pretty effective way to get there.
Turns out it works.
Yeah.
Transport, water is going to move.
I think the teleporters might wind up playing a pretty big part of this matchup.
Yeah, I think it's going to really play in Mark's favor. It might also help Steven get his fire commies moving around and get within range of his morphers. But we'll see. I think that's the airborne 8.
It's a little bit tough to make out everything, but is that just a couple of skyscrapers? I'm surprised not to see 1 or 2 more out there.
I think I see maybe 3 total. He's also got the hotels.
Right.
So, I mean, it looks like he's got 6 total with the underground
Yeah,
network.
yeah, that's sufficient, sure.
And, of course, the Empire State Building with the Sun Dome. Do you think it would be beneficial if Steven took the route of going across the board and destroying the buildings that Mark might want to use as a power base? Because Steven with the Earth Avatars doesn't really need a power base like Mark does.
Right.
To sustain himself.
The biggest question there is whether it's worth the risk and reward. It's very beneficial, absolutely, but it can also be kind of risky. If you get kind of trapped over there, especially with a ground-based monster, you get penned in by units or something, you can waste some time trying to get back to a safer locale, and meanwhile you're getting beat on a point here, a point there from units, plus who knows what from the monster.
Yeah. We're going to cut to an interview with Steven right before the match.
Because Akosia doesn't have the movement. She's got no movement ability. She's a pedestrian. So for her to try to go to the other side of the board to get the monster with no healing and no movement abilities, she'll easily get boxed in. So I have to push hard with units in the beginning of the game. I have to get them flustered, and then I have to basically make them come to me, at which point I can duel it out in the alpha, get those free moves, keep the unit pressure on. Then once I go hyper, by that time I want to have their P-dice denied, and I want to basically control the dice at that point.
C-type, Thanos, and the Water Crown leading with the C-type. It's got red power glitch. Cast it there.
It's going to give me a power die. And I think I'd like to pick one. You command but not an experience.
Push up, say right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So the game is well underway, and Steven took his first hit.
Move. Quick.
It's like Lamar.
Yeah, I sat down here and I saw the helmet. Could it be?
Ball statue. Okay. Got it. Extra for money and an energy cycle.
Alright, I get 3 counters back.
Come on, 2. Viper. Knockers move 7.
Looks like Steven's examining the board and trying to decide whether to use transport and where to put the unit to protect himself from a pretty mean power attack.
Help him stomp.
Want to transport? Is it still my turn?
Are you surprised he brawled the Statue of Liberty so early?
I'm not surprised he brawled the Statue of Liberty. I'm kind of surprised that he brawled it from in line with that hotel.
Yeah.
Especially, I can't really see how many P-die Mark has or if he has any. But if he can hike a route and get over there, that could be pretty nasty.
Absolutely. He's got a lot of action dice still in his monster pool, though. If his opponent doesn't, that won't be an issue.
Looks like both Mark and Steven are decently comfortable with their forces and with their gameplay. They don't look too nervous or anything. I would guess after 5 rounds you're pretty comfortable with what you're doing.
Sure. Definitely gives you a chance to really stick with the models that you know and really plan out your strategy and then make it work for you. I know a lot of you guys have been testing some of these forces for quite a bit longer than just the past couple weeks or so. Weren't you saying that some guys have been testing what they wanted to play this weekend for a couple of months already?
Yeah, I know pretty much as soon as we announced it in January, there were people that started testing for this. So we'll see what happens. I know Steven's been playing a lot of Monster Apocalypse since January. He's pretty excited to make the top 8 even, but he's hoping he can pull a victory here. And I know Mark also started practicing in January. I remember I played a game with Mark. He was using Zorm Cross, and I was somewhat jokingly using Mega Legionnaire, and I was just very impressed with the things that Mark was capable of doing with his morphers. Things that I really just didn't see coming or couldn't see, and he just really surprised me and put the hurt on me.
Yeah, preparation is definitely a huge part of the equation, I think, both in terms of really knowing and understanding your own army at a strong fundamental level, but then also being familiar enough with what all things people can throw at you to just really be aware. A lot of people, a lot of games today seem to have been decided by just the little things that maybe one player knew and understood and played correctly that another player perhaps didn't.
These two combined brawl in the water avatar.
Mark has a very interesting technique of rolling. He goes to roll and he always puts his hand out to block them. I think he's had some dice accidents, if I'm correct.
I do the same, honestly. Even so, I still dropped one today. It's never good.
Was it one of the black ones?
I think it was a white one.
I know Will was playing earlier in a side tournament, and he dropped a black B-die of the Covenant dice on the floor, and he couldn't find it for a little while.
Did he get it eventually?
He found it.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
Yeah, I think he stepped on it.
It's a good way to find a die.
Power Roar to get this back. Okay. Okay. Good units.
Looks like Steven didn't pay for knocking that Statue of Liberty down.
No.
He'll be safe. I'm guessing he'll screen now. Drop a... This is actually kind of a slow turn for Steven. Normally he's pretty quick to decide what he wants to do. He kind of knows what he wants to do in advance, but I think he may be facing a pretty interesting situation here. And, of course, it's top 8.
Sure. That's always a factor. We do have those timers, though, to make sure that people don't just kind of slow play it, but that they're really focused and moving forward at every step of the game. From everything that I saw, I think that worked out pretty well today. Kept things moving smoothly, and a couple times that people ran out of time, but for the most part, people were able to adjust to it pretty well from everything that I saw.
Yeah, I think the timers are an interesting element. I know I was watching some games where just naturally the players would go in 1, maybe 2 minutes on a turn. But then there are other games where the opponent does something surprising, and you're just kind of sitting there, and you see that clock ticking down, and it just adds this extra element of pressure to the turn. And I know that I think it was Kevin I was talking to. He's in the top 8 as well, and he was talking about how one time he thought he could do something or had extra boost die that he didn't end up getting, so he had to come up with a whole new turn in about 45 seconds. And
oh wow,
it was pretty intense, and I'm sure that happened all day, and regrettably so for some people, and thankfully for others.
One of the things that's interesting is that there's so many turns that really they're totally done in, 20, 30 seconds, no problem, and then others you really need that time. One of the things that Privateer Press has used in War Machine is the clock extension, where once per game you can extend the clock a bit, gain a little bit of extra time for that critical turn. You can only do it once per game, but when it really matters, you can take the extra time you need, think it out, plan it out, come up with a new strategy, and implement it. And that's something I've been thinking about potentially adding to the Monster Apocalypse Organized Play document. What's your take on that?
Would you be able to kind of call that emergency play in the event? Let's say it's my last turn and there's 3 minutes left in time. If I used it, would it extend time by 5 minutes, or is it only usable?
The time extension gets factored into the round time. So let's say it's a 3-minute clock extension. That would say that round times, instead of 60 minutes, would be 66 minutes, for example, so that you'd be counted for both of the 2 clock extensions.
We're gonna take a short break in the audio to resolve a technical difficulty.
Nothing proven. Huh? You don't have to prove anything with that airborne ape. Put them away. Apes don't belong.
Apes don't match. What are you doing? Slow down, crazy. 2 volts rain? No, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Airborne 8, T-type, Katana, Water Kami. Here, Airborne 8 fleets.
Okay.
That's 2, C-type, that's 3. High impact.
Yep.
Gotcha. I need to hit S2. Yes.
Got it. Alrighty.
No, it's Harvard.
Yeah.
And back to you.
Alright.
Move. And I'm going to stop.
Alright, so the technical difficulty has been resolved and we're back. Looks like it's Steven's turn. And I'm guessing...
Let's make sure it does.
He's rolling some dice.
He is rolling a lot of dice.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
You can really see those black dice
I'm
up
gonna
there.
get 3 for that. Plus 1 for monument.
Down goes another building.
Another monument, no less. Steven's tearing through the iChomp New York monuments.
I think he's, if I'm right, hoping to get all the buildings down that could really do some bad things to him. If he got thrown into him or smashed into him. I know when I play against him with Kondo, he knows he's going to get thrown or smashed at some point, especially with Sprint, and he'll use his early monster turns to get P-Die and to get rid of those buildings that
Sure.
might hurt him later on.
Looks like Mark's got a really nice power base for the time being, but on this map it's also one that's fairly easily disrupted, I think. With the location of that teleporter and the location of Steven's spawn points, I don't know how long that's going to stay safe and helping him to really empower his agenda here.
Yeah, I mean, with if he would just spawn one water avatar, send it over there and drop a water kami, it's going to be a mess to deal with, honestly.
Yep.
But hypering up.
Oof.
Here it
This
comes.
could definitely be interesting.
This is the first big move of the game, I would say. I would argue.
Oh, sure. Does he have enough power dice sitting there to make
I think he's going to
yet
smash
another
him.
monument come into play?
I think he's going to smash him at least into the skyscraper. If he can get him to
Sure.
the monument, this is not good for Steven, because Steven might be able to get him to that power plant, but that's about it. That would not be...
Not a fair trade, no.
not a healthy trade. The real question is, if Steven can get him to the electrical power plant, does Mark hyper down or not?
Well, with the location where he's going to wind up here, I think potentially no.
I
It's
guess
not
the real
really
question
a
is,
great spot to have 4 morphers just sitting there waiting to
Well,
take it.
I guess my question is, if, well, I guess where he's at, Steven's going to have to throw him 7. So, if he hypers down, whether or not he hypers down, he's probably going to get thrown into the electrical power plant. And if Steven's in his Ultra Aquosia, that's 4 damage.
Right.
Would you rather have 4, as Mark, would you rather have 4 damage on your Alpha or your Mega right here? Which one do you want going into the late game? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because if Mark were to hyper down post-attack, assuming everything goes well, then... and take 4 damage on his Alpha, later on he could hyper up and then hyper back down when he knows he's going to be taking a pretty mean attack. Or vice versa, either way.
It depends, too, on just how many power dice are sitting over there. If you could throw him the full 7, then yeah, it's not going to make a big difference, but smashing the morphers when they're in a little brick like that when you've got super damage, that's pretty nasty. and then you really don't need a whole ton of power dice to pull it off.
And then we forget about hitting around on his power attack.
Sure. He's been using that to great effect all weekend. Saw an earlier game where he was able to move to really good positioning and be well screened from any effective measures of Counter-Strike.
Alright, so we're going to go ahead and cut to an interview with Mark.
Screen, I try to use natural screens. Buildings are already in place. Using that, you can just place a unit or two where they might be able to enter. Most of the time, if you're aggressive enough, it doesn't come up. I just sort of know that my Morpher is going to die and try to save the Mega for that form kill that will end the game.
So it looks like Steven went for the throw. I don't know if he's hoping to maybe use his airborne ape on the electrical power plant on his next unit turn. And
It's
then
the right position for it.
go ahead and get that 2 damage down on the unit turn. So a couple fire combos and an airborne ape could really put the hurt on right here. And then Mark is still deep in Steven's territory, so it's not a good position to hyper down. And it's going to be interesting. It's a pretty bold move by Mark to take that smash. I mean, it was 4 damage on Equosia. What do you think?
4 damage is hard to pass up, especially when you have sufficient dice available to really make that happen. It can, depending on the board situation, it can be a good 2 turns, even with these powerful monsters in their hyper forms, to make that back up, given the right positioning and screening. And it's a risk, but I think it's a calculated risk that will probably pay off. 4 damage is very helpful.
I know I was talking to Steven earlier, and one of his main goals against Mark using Zorma Cross was to get Mark on his side of the board, because if he can keep him over there and Mark chooses or has to hyper down, then his units can get some easy damage in. And even like with the electrical power plant, this is going to be a nice play if he can do the airborne trick. So, for one reason or another, Steven really wanted the fight to be on his side of the map.
In general, you're in a better position when you can keep the opposing monster on your side of the map. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but for the most part, the increased ability to deal damage with your units, along with just your increased options in how you want the fight to progress over there, is superior to trying to chase down your opponent. Because that can be one of the toughest part, is really just getting to the other guy. Forget really pulling off your move or making the roll, but just being able to get to him effectively. With a good screen and in the right position and on his side of the map, that can be a real chore.
Now, I just kind of had an interesting idea. Do you think it would potentially be to Mark's benefit to destroy the electrical power plant himself with his units?
And just take the one?
Instead of the 2. And he would get the P-die from destroying the building as opposed to Steven getting it. If you could send even 2 katanas over there, you could probably get it done.
In elite and regular?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a thought. I remember in the first Masters when I think it was Josh went over to the other side of his board with his units and got rid of the crystal, and when was it Josh versus Josh in the Masters?
I know Josh won.
The Josh that didn't win
Okay.
went over to the other side and destroyed the crystalline with his units. Alex was his name. Alex went over to the other side and destroyed the crystalline, which I thought was a brilliant move. And I think it took Josh by surprise a little bit, and that could be here. And there's the airborne ape that I fully expected, and we saw that a lot today. The airborne ape coming in, getting next to the monster, shooting a different unit, a different building, or a different morpher and then doing the radial attack damage.
In this case, he's going to have to roll pretty high to make that damage stick.
2 fire commies and airborne 8 might be able to do the trick. We'll see.
Yep, we'll see.
Three fire commies.
Oh, in that case.
That would probably get the job done.
Oh, yeah. Only thing that would make that more of a sure bet is if you could throw a bank in there.
That'd be a pretty safe bet.
Oh, yeah.
I'd invest in that decision.
You'd bank on it?
I would bank on it, yeah.
Oh.
Where's... Will Schick is not in the room. It's not time for bad puns.
Yeah, you're right. You got me there.
We gotta stay away
I should
from
leave that for him.
What do you think's going through Mark's head right now? Do you think when he went over for the smash and he knew he was going to hit and run, do you think he saw Steven coming over, throwing him, and being next to the electrical power plant?
Well, I mean, I think that you know Mark a lot better than I do, but I think that he's probably more planning ahead. It's like, alright, so this happened. I took some damage for it. Where do I go from here? What's the best way to move forward and make this battle work in my favor? I would definitely be looking towards trying to get one more turn with the Ultra and then possibly using hit and run to then power down in a more advantageous position. Because he certainly wants to take back control of the momentum of the game.
It doesn't look like he's running.
It doesn't. You are right. What is he doing here?
Well, he's got Steven and
is this a SWAT?
Yeah, I think so. He's got
So
Steven.
he's still got hit and run.
He does have hit and run.
Right.
But I'm kind of surprised that, this is aggressive, and we saw him do this all day, and it worked out for him. And it did work. So now we're looking at a 3 health Aquosia, I believe, and 6 total health on Macros. But
where does he go from here?
Yeah.
Do he use the hit and run to really reset the board?
Oh, he's hypering down.
He is indeed. This is where I thought he might go with it.
He went to the water and
Yep.
disappeared.
A tactical withdrawal.
Earlier today, he was playing Dragon from Chicago, and he actually used the very same tactic. And I think that's one that a lot of players don't really remember as possible. Is for a morpher with jump like that to go over water and just disappear.
Well, and there's also a lot of maps where even trying to do that, you'll leave one guy stranded, and that can be a bit of a problem. But on this particular map, that was the perfect position to really just run away, reset the board, and take control back for the momentum of the game.
Steven's in a tight spot here. He's got 3 health on 1 form left, and to get this game going, he's got to get some damage in. Macross is sitting at 2 on his hyper and 4 on his alpha, so if Steven could somehow find a 4 damage attack here, it would equalize the game a bit, but I'm not sure if there is one. We'll see.
It would be perfect, but that's a long path to take. Mark doesn't have what I would consider a perfect screen right now, where you're guaranteed to block a lot of those attempts, but it's enough distance between them that I don't think it's going to prove too relevant. Even if Steven gets over there, that's a lot of dice to make that happen.
I think if Steven did do that, he would have to hope that he could finish the 2 on Mega Zor Macross with his units, which is going to be a tough thing. He's got several units on the board. He'd get him over there for the blast, but it'd be really tough.
If it was a low defense monster, there'd be a decent shot at it, but someone like Zermacross, it's not too likely. 2 damage unit turns in that case are a tough proposition.
Now, I think another option for Steven would be to not be so aggressive with it and use that 3 health for as long as he can get it. Because if he can get, while Mark is in his Morphers, his Airborne 8 positioned properly, he could potentially get several damage in. But we'll see what he does here. He's
Yeah,
in a
based
really
on
tight
the
spot.
current board position, if I'm looking at it right, looks like he might be able to pull a 3 out of it, which would be very nice. Not quite enough to deal the form, though.
Of course, I would imagine that Mark would do something about that on his unit turn.
Sure.
Of course, once the Mecha Brontox is here, the Royal Brontox, we will be seeing a much different game.
Yeah, it certainly will have an impact. Much like the Statue of Liberty, though, you can have that beacon 1 minute and lose it the next. Well, looks like he's not going too conservative here.
He's an action to
Extinguish.
extinguish.
Extinguish is always nice. Interesting.
He's going for a
Wow.
blast here.
It did cost him a lot of dice to get there, though.
Indeed, he's definitely going with the unit turn next. Which is interesting because he's really going to have to screen in that position.
That's going to be tough.
He's in a nasty position, so I guess Mark's low on P-die, but if Mark can hyper up, he can go for the gold.
He may also just try and grab a 2 damage monster turn and then try and finish it with the units. Because he knows Steven's not taking a monster turn next.
And Mark there wanted to get some P-die from Power Sync, however, thanks to the stock exchange, Steven denied him.
Stock exchange is a very powerful equalizer. Certainly cuts that sort of planning off at the pass. Keeps things kind of fair, but if you're the guy controlling it, you can use it to your advantage and give it up when you want to start gathering P-dice from your opponent.
Now, I was discussing with some players earlier in between rounds, and they were kind of getting to the idea that you pretty much either, in most cases, run the insurance building or the stock exchange.
I would agree with that, yeah. I think it depends a lot on the monster, a little on the faction, a lot on player style, just choice of how you want to proceed, what your game plan is.
Now, I know that, like, for me, example, with King Kondo, I definitely love the insurance building.
Sure.
But with, like, Sky Sentinel, with whom I hardly ever take back-to-back monster turns, who I don't destroy very many buildings, stock exchange helps shut down all those other nasty monsters out there. So it's kind of one or the other.
Yeah, it's the great equalizer. The only time you really got to watch it is against enemies that have access to Override. Because that is the one pitfall of the stock exchange.
Moves.
Happens to a lesser extent with the insurance company, but I think with the stock exchange, if your opponent plays a certain way, they can easily start racking up power dice for you that they then turn to their own advantage.
Now, what's interesting here, and I know it gets talked about on the forum somewhat, is the turn phases and the way they go for the players. So, like here, Mark's taking a unit turn, and then Steven will get a unit turn. So he'll be capable of disrupting, limiting Mark's P-dice production, and it'll make a game-winning attack potentially less statistically viable. And if he can limit Mark enough, a miss here would be gigantic. If Mark puts himself in a bad position, and then Steven can come back with a monster turn, that could really change the game. I know there were several critical misses in various games today as time was going off and just in the rounds, and any one turn could have completely changed the game. Someone's bound to miss at some point.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that kind of ties into that are these what some people might call kind of useless turns, where they don't really do a whole lot with the monster, but they take a monster turn to just kind of alter the tempo, to change who's going first, to flip-flop which units go first or which monsters go first, and kind of this turn order that arises from just going back and forth, unit, monster. And even when those turns don't appear to do a whole lot, they can really be effective in the hands of a good player. It becomes even better with shuffle, because then you're not losing any momentum when you choose to do it.
Yeah. It's definitely a deep and interesting concept of the game when you're paying attention to who's going when and those kind of things, and you start thinking 3, 4, maybe even 5 turns out. It really changes how you play.
Sure.
What do you think Steven's thinking here? This is going to take a Rudy moment.
I think he knows he needs a big move. He needs something to
He really needs Mark
really
to
turn
miss.
the tide.
He's got to deny Mark P-Die.
He's got to have a good turn and have Mark miss, I think. Being down on overall health, 6-2, he's in a tough spot. You can't afford to play it conservatively at this point. He's going to have to go all out and then get a little bit lucky on the dice.
And because he's running Elemental Champions, he has no form of healing.
Right.
So, I know there were some Cthulhu games earlier where a player would be down to 2 health and his opponent has a full form left. And the player runs back to their side of the board and spawns meat slaves and brawl stuff that would leech and all kinds of stuff. And would heal all the way back up.
Yeah, that's always a factor. When monsters can heal, you got to keep that firmly in mind. I had a game like that myself earlier, where my opponent was able to, through careful screening and careful positioning, able to get his form from nearly dead back up to full health for that form. So yeah, it's something to always watch out for. But in this case, Elemental Champions, yep, he's going to have to go all out. He's going to have to make this turn count and put pressure on for the next one. Especially if you can make Mark commit while not having enough power dice.
And that's why the turn structure here is critical, because Steven has a unit turn, I believe, and he can completely disrupt Mark. And without power dice, it's going to be a really tough turn. Even with combining with all the morphers to do some mega attack, it makes it significantly tougher to hit a monster. Which, I don't think anybody's missed. Mark, I think, missed a power-up earlier, but I'm not sure that anyone's missed on an attack yet. So I would imagine someone in this game is going to miss.
These are real veteran players, though, who are not taking too many heavy gambles. Sometimes players shoot for that 40% shot or something in the hopes that they make it. These guys are really sticking to the odds. And while sooner or later you're bound to miss,
yep,
for the most part, the attacks that I've really noticed the dice on, they've been throwing big handfuls of dice with really good odds of connecting with whatever they're throwing.
Now, we were kind of discussing this earlier, but you've been to every major Monsterpocalypse event.
Yeah, I think I have.
And do you tend to notice that the players that end up in the finals and the top roll more dice in their attacks?
That's a good question. I think so. I think that the top players rely on having a few good attacks rather than just hoping to get lucky. Because sooner or later the luck does run out. And sure, you can miss the really probable attacks, but you're going to miss them far less often than just kind of the spray and pray method of just shotgunning out lots of attacks and hoping something sticks. So I have noticed that with a lot of the guys who were at Adepticon, with a lot of the folks here. Have you seen that as well, or?
Well, we were somewhat, like I said, we were discussing this earlier, and I feel like most players view whether or not they should hit an attack on kind of the Kaiju Conundrum rules.
Sure.
And with those rules, you're really only getting 70-ish%. And at 70%, you're still missing almost 1 out of every 3 times. And assuming you made one attack per turn, 1 out of every 3 turns is a miss.
Well, and furthermore, the odds of hitting 2 70% in a row are actually less than 50-50.
Right.
A lot of people don't think about it that way, but when you start getting into the combinatorics of it, you're looking at very different odds than just the raw odds of one particular roll viewed in a vacuum. So I do think that at the higher levels of play, you see less of the gambling and more of the, I planned this out, I got this right in the right position, I'm going to make it stick. And I have seen a lot of that today and also at other high-level play experiences.
Yeah, and I will say that I've also seen good players not doing that on particular turns, and I think it's more of a judgment call, because there's sometimes when I'm willing to make a SWAT attempt at a lower percentage, because if I miss, I might be screened, or I don't have it's not a big repercussion. But when there's a lot of risk, and you're rolling a 70% attack, and if you miss, your opponent's going to kill your form.
Oh, sure.
I mean, I don't really have any sympathy for you when you're like, oh, it should have hit.
I had 51% odds. Yeah.
I mean,
it totally depends what's on the line. If you're looking at killing one unit that's in your way and maybe dealing a point to a monster and you whiff, that's not a big deal. When you're looking at some 4 or 5 damage hit, go all in. You've already invested everything it takes to get there. Make sure it happens.
Yeah. Now, and on those critical moves, I've noticed that most of these players who are sitting at these top tables are rolling in the upper 90%. When you're putting yourself where if you miss, you're probably going to lose the game, they're rolling a very big handful of dice.
Yep.
Now, I will mention that it was interesting that on that last turn, Steven made no attacks. I think he's really trying to limit Mark's options here. Now Mark's going to be able to get in there and I think do the lightning attack that one of those morphers has.
I'm sure that's what he's shooting for here.
It could be the game, but like I said, now you're rolling 2 attacks.
Right.
And so a critical miss. Steven has enough units on the board where if Mark is going straight after a Quosia and he misses here, Steven could potentially form kill the Alpha that now has to hyper up. And because of the teleporters, Steven just needs to do 2 on his unit turn.
Now, it's kind of a little bit hard to tell from this angle, but I think Steven might be in a position where he's only allowing 3 morphers in on the action.
Which is very smart on his part.
Yeah, it's another way to mitigate it. With Zorma Cross, though, I believe only 3 of them have boost dice anyway. So there's pros and cons of taking that route. Depends on how much of an investment he really needed to spend to limit that one extra guy that isn't really bringing in the boost anyway. Huh. Doesn't look like he's going all in for a single lightning attack. Looks like 2 separate attacks here.
I think maybe the morpher without the boost die may be attacking units here.
Build up the power dice. Get enough extra power dice going on to really...
I think this is 3 separate attacks, or 4 separate attacks.
Is this chain reaction?
He's just taking out all the units with all his different morphers.
Gotcha.
Interesting. I didn't see this coming. Chain attack. I'm guessing that monster had chain attack, so that was 1 attack.
I'm not sure.
All
I'm
those
trying to
units.
remember. Right, yeah.
So he just chain attacked those units and cleared the way. It's going to make Steven's 2 damage on a unit turn much more difficult.
But he's still got his try at the lightning attack, which is now empowered by all of those power dice he just picked up.
Interesting. So
that could finish it.
That could. Steven may be regretting that positioning of units. We'll see if he moves his health tracker here. I don't know. I'm guessing.
Looks like the first attack of the lightning attack hit. How about the second one?
That's the game.
There it is.
Congratulations to Mark for being 6-0 on the day, and
it's pretty amazing.
We'll be back in just a little bit with the next round of top 8. Good game.
So what do you think? Very strong.
I knew it was coming. There's nothing
Huh?
else to do.
Mark got it, yeah. He deserves it, though. Definitely deserves it.
My boy's looking good.
Second time I've used lightning attack on Brawl today.
I was trying my hardest to prevent you, but I knew that teleporter just wasn't gonna happen.
Yeah, I was honestly thinking of just pushing most of my dice or just attacking units, because it didn't matter if you killed my
Yes.
unit or two. Like, that swap would have been better.